Welcome back to the Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, and we're trying to put out wildfires. Well, even better than having to put out fires would, of course, be avoiding fires in the first place to the degree that's possible. I've got a terrific guest with us, Amy Berry. Amy is the CEO of the Tahoe Fund. And so that should tell you two things. One, she's probably in Tahoe, and two, something to do with money and the good use of that money. And I know one of the things that Amy has been on the news for recently is championing some efforts to reduce the fuel loads in the forests and the wildlife around Tahoe. So, Amy, tell me about that process and about you. How are you today?
Great. Thanks, Steve. Great to be here. Appreciate all the light you're shining on this issue because it's a big one. And already June, we're seeing major wildfires kicking off in the California and Nevada regions. So we had a big wildfire in Reno, just north of downtown just last week. So top of mind for sure. I'm the CEO of the Tahoe Fund. We're a nonprofit. Our whole focus is to raise private philanthropic dollars to help get more environmental improvement projects done all around Lake Tahoe. About 5 years ago, we looked at all the different types of projects we do, and the board decided that forest health had to be our number one priority. Really simply, if we let this forest burn down, not only are we going to lose homes and loss of life, but we focus on recreation and transportation and lake clarity, and that's all going to be gone if we have a major wildfire. So we decided that forest health was our number one goal. As we started to dig into it, as you said, we got really focused on the prevention side. There's a lot of people that are working on fighting the fires. There's a lot of people doing great philanthropic work on relief efforts after a fire unfortunately comes through. Our board decided that we should really focus on the prevention side. And when we dug into the prevention side, what we learned pretty quickly is our biggest issue is we just have too many trees in our forest. Across the whole West we do, but within Tahoe, we're a 220,000 acre basin. And according to Land Tender, a new technology that we helped fund, we have about 22 million too many trees in this area. We used to, you probably remember the days you heard the days of, the Donner Party traveling west in their wagons through the forest. And now you can't even see through the forest, let alone ride a wagon through the forest. So we have a really unhealthy situation here. And it's just exacerbated by drought and bark beetle and really warming temperatures. And so we are pretty focused on how do we reduce the threat of wildfire by reducing the density of trees and creating healthier forests that can better withstand wildfire when it does come.
This is a great mission. And first, I want to congratulate you on having obtained such a wise board.
They're amazing. We have the best board.
To be able to create such a strong priority and to choose that as their priority. Particularly with the eye on prevention. And so whether we got into this situation in the Tahoe area of too many trees by virtue of overzealous suppression or whatever the source was, doesn't really matter, right? This is the problem that you're stuck dealing with. So what are the strategies that you're going about in terms of, reducing the fuel loads?
Well, so we're looking at a few different areas of focus. One is we have so many trees in the forest, so how do we get rid of them, in a healthy, scientific way? We're not talking about clear cutting. We're talking about really strategical planning to remove the right trees to create the right environment for healthy trees to prosper. And one of the big issues is we don't have very valuable trees in the Tahoe forest. We have soft wood. And for years we heard, well, there's really no value. It's not hardwood. And when you're doing forest thinning treatments, you don't want to take out the big trees. The big trees are the ones you want to leave. And then we ran into somebody who said, actually, you can start a sawmill and make quite a bit of money with small diameter trees. Like there's still a market for that. We ended up funding a study to look at how much wood is in the forest for a 70-mile radius around a particular biomass facility that we were trying to help get turned back on. And an investor saw that who happened to sit on our board, and he said, oh my gosh, there's a huge opportunity here to not only have a big impact on the environment, but to also create a revenue generating and job generating opportunity And they decided to start a new sawmill, the first new sawmill in the area in over 100 years. And then we were able to connect them to our local Washoe tribe of California and Nevada. And this was about 2 years ago. And now they're up and running with a brand new sawmill just 10 miles from the Lake Tahoe Basin.
Wow.
And interestingly, you asked how we got in this situation. Well, Tahoe was completely milled back in the silver mining days. There was the great Comstock lode in the 1860s and 70s, and they fueled that Comstock lode by cutting down every tree in Tahoe and this intricate flume trail system where they would bring the logs up a bull wheel, put them in these log flumes, and fly them down into the valley, then put them on a train and get them up to Virginia City. I mean, it's incredible engineering marvel. But the
They did all
impact
this with
was,
no apps, right?
yeah, no apps. They chopped down almost every single tree in the Tahoe Basin. And so what
Right.
happened is all the trees grew back with the wrong diversity, the wrong density. They're all the same age. There's no tree canopies. And it makes them incredibly susceptible to bark beetle infestation and drought. And then you add the fire suppression policies to it. So what's really interesting is it just so happens that the land that the Washoe tribe had to put this sawmill on is almost the exact same site as a sawmill during the Comstock lode. So it's kind of history coming back a little bit. But this time we will not be clear cutting every tree in Tahoe.
Right.
So it's pretty exciting. So we are really focused on wood utilization. How can we create markets and opportunities to get this wood out of the forest? So a new sawmill is huge. I mean, what was happening before was the Forest Service would go through all of their NEPA. They would have, say, 2,000 acres completely approved, and they would put it out to bid, and the contractors were not bidding because they didn't have anywhere to take the wood.
Right.
Now that
There
there's a
wasn't a
sawmill
market
10
for it.
miles away, they can sign contracts because it's a very inexpensive way to get the wood, and they can do multiple trips a day. Often you probably know this, but what kills a forest health project on an economic scale is that the transportation costs are just so overwhelming that you can't break even on a project. So what they end up doing is cutting down some trees and pile burning them, leaving them in piles to burn
Right.
later. But it's not having a place to take it is critical. So the sawmill is one. We're also working with a community service district by the North Star ski resort. It's not part of Vail Resorts. It's a public service district, but they're going to replace their gas boilers with wood boilers. So they'll be taking wood chips from forest health treatments and fueling all of their heat in the village and with their HOAs from wood. And what's great about that is it solves our excess wood problem, but the price of gas is just kind of out of control, right? Every time
Right.
Putin blinks in Russia, and then all of a sudden gas prices spike. It's really hard to manage. So they're actually going to see a huge cost savings by going to wood over gas. So it's a real win-win. So it's one of the first new biomass facilities in the area. It's not going to be power-based. It's just heat-based. And we've been working with them and our friends at the Forest Service to see if we can get some other ski resort areas engaged to put some more biomass to heat plants around the area. We'll need a lot of them. So
Right.
we don't think we can solve this with one thing. This is a stack of ideas that are all going to kind of come together.
But it's scalable, right? You can prove it out and then replicate it.
Absolutely. And back east, they're great at this. I mean, the North Star folks did a site tour to New Hampshire and Maine and Vermont, and they have, hospitals running heat and schools. So it's a very safe way to produce heat that actually helps reduce carbon emissions because you're not burning these trees in wildfire. So that's been pretty exciting. We're looking at that. We also made an investment in a company called Kodama, which is using remote robotics and AI to remote operate skidders in the forest. I mean, one of the big issues is the workforce. So yes, we have too many trees. We have to find places to take them, but we have to find people to do the work. And so Kodama is looking at creating a remote workforce. So they're working with a company down in Sonora right now, and they've put some teleoperating equipment on there. So you could be sitting in Boulder, Colorado, Steve, and you could be operating a masticator in a forest in California.
Okay, that sounds way fun.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. They also have the crazy.
Could I get my kid to give up his Xbox in favor of remote controlled skidder?
Well, this is it, right? Kids would love this.
Yeah.
So why don't you gamify forest health work?
Absolutely.
So that's been fun. We're looking at how do we get the wood out, biomass utilization. We're also looking at how do we just do this faster and at a bigger scale. So we did a great pilot a couple weeks ago with BurnBot, which has two machines. So we're doing a two-phase pilot. This was their remote masticating machine. They brought it up to a very steep slope in Incline Village to show. We had 75 people out for the day, all from all the different fire districts in the area and the Forest Service, to see how it works. And what's pretty neat is there's no one in the machine. So it's not top heavy. So it can go on very steep slopes that manned equipment couldn't, and also very dangerous for hand crews to get on. You don't want to put somebody with a chainsaw on a very steep slope. It's just asking for trouble. So this has a machine that goes through the forest with somebody, remote control operating 10 feet away, and they're able to take down all the brush, and they drive it back into the ground. They can take down, I think the trees were 8 to 9 inches in diameter. So they're really clearing the forest floor, which then paves the way to do some prescribed fire treatment later. And they were able to do 22 acres in 3 days. That would normally take a hand crew over 2 weeks to do. So,
wow, what a great use of as a labor extender.
Yeah, pretty exciting. And you worry, like, is technology going to take away jobs? And I think with this, one is we don't have enough people to do the work we need.
Right.
And what was really interesting is one of the fire chiefs said, we hire these hand crews and we make them do all this work, but what they really want to do is go fight fire. So they're doing work until they get called up for a fire. But if they haven't finished their prescribed treatment that they've been given, they can't go to the fire. So this will enable them to oversee the prescribed treatment much more quickly, so that when the call comes and they can go fight a fire, they can go fight a fire and they're not doing hand crew work. So it really has a force multiplier there, which is great.
And I like
and
the
they'll
way
be back. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was saying I like the way that you're creating an economic incentives to do the right thing by creating markets for lesser quality biomass.
Yep.
It's not the big hardwoods, it's the smaller trees, and even the smaller trees have a lot of branches that don't have any real lumber or timber value. So pellets, great idea. Toilet paper and paper towels, right? These are things that could be made from low quality pulp.
Yeah.
And we used to hear people say, oh, don't waste so many paper towels. They're killing a tree for that. Well, yeah, we have too many trees.
Yeah, that's been the biggest paradigm shift. Is really, I run the Tahoe Fund. We do environmental projects, and here I am saying, growing up my whole life, if you love trees, if you love nature, what do? You hug a tree. And here we are saying, if you love nature, you've actually got to remove some trees to save. You got to remove some trees to save the forest. So yeah, and then BurnBot has a very cool prescribed fire robot, which we're really excited about. So they'll be coming back in September. And it's basically, I think of it as like a Zamboni on the forest floor.
Okay.
The prescribed fire happens within the box. It's fully contained.
Yep.
And that way you don't have to worry about losing control of a prescribed burn, which is a very natural risk. We're dealing with fire here. And we're excited to have them come back. And what you can do is you can use the remote masticator to kind of clear up all the brush. Then you bring in the BurnBot, the fire robot, and it can char the landscape, or it can create a border, which then you can do prescribed fire within the border that they create. So that'll be pretty exciting. We're for us, it's how do we find solutions and where does technology really play a role here? On that note, right now we have a lot of people that need to get what are called BMPs, their best management practices done, which is basically how do you create defensible space around your home? You can't have trees too close to your home because if a fire comes, it's just going to burn your house down. So we have Tahoe Fire and Fuels team, which is I think made up of like 12 different fire districts in the Tahoe Basin. I probably have that number wrong, but it's close. I think there's 20 agencies in this fire group. And right now people go out and they bring their clipboards and they tell you, okay, you got to take that tree down. You got to take that tree down. We'll put a circle around it. They write it down. They hand you your notepad. So a company called Fire Aside has taken all of that and put it in the digital world and up in the cloud. And so now fire inspectors can go out with a tablet. They can give you all that information. Then it spits out a prescription for you locally. You can give that to your arborist. You can also schedule when they'll come with a chipper to chip your trees that you take down. And what's really cool is all that information then gets aggregated. So we can see what it looks like across the whole region. So we were really excited to partner with the local community foundation, Parasol, to fund that for every fire district in the whole basin. So now everybody will have access to this. And it just increases the pace and scale of fixing our forest, of getting too many trees out of the way.
It sounds like then the weak link is the homeowner who receives the prescription for reducing their fuel load, but doesn't have the resources or the time to do it.
Yeah,
And
and
so
what they're
that's the next
finding is
level of
that
funding,
this
right?
actually, it's such a simple system and it's so motivating that it's motivating more action by homeowners to actually get the work done.
Oh, great,
Yeah, so that's
great.
been really exciting.
And I know some communities that will sponsor or reimburse a homeowner's expenses when they undertake mitigation and efforts.
Yeah, there's some grant programs. We're looking at that. We did a study to look at vulnerable populations because rebate programs work great if you have the money to put up front and then
Right.
get it back. But not everyone has that kind of cash on hand. So we're looking at how can we really drill down on what the vulnerable populations need more, and maybe it's a grant program as opposed to a rebate program. So doing some work with our forest health partners in that space too.
And even those grants, can save communities tremendous dollars. One of
Yeah.
the strategies, right, is, save the first home.
Yep.
Well, if the first homeowner, can't do the right mitigation, but the community pays for that, that's going to save the community tremendous fire expenses.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then on the workforce front, we still need people to do it, even if we can create robotics and remote masticating. And so we've gone really into a great partnership with the local community college, Lake Tahoe Community College. They got a Cal Fire grant a couple of years ago to put together a new forestry program. And we came in and gave scholarships to every single student in the first year of the program,
Wow.
which ended up selling out. And so now the program's been expanding. We continue to do our scholarships. We got a wonderful grant from one of our donors to actually bring in a director of all their forestry operations to kind of oversee everything. Got to spend some time with the forestry students, and it's exciting. There's a big career out there in the forest health space, and so just getting kids that first step to give them the skills so that they can go get the jobs. And that's what we need. We need to start working on the workforce today because we're going to need them for many, many years to solve this problem.
Yeah, we sure will. It
Yeah,
seems like stuff gets done when people around care. If you've ever been
absolutely.
in a relationship, you might have heard, well, if you really cared, you would have done blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
Right? And so I'm guessing this applies in mitigation efforts and other, ecologically sound practices, is when you have more people who care, more is going to happen. And it seems like reaching out to the college seems like such a brilliant move because younger people seem to care more about the state of the environment that we're leaving to them.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the college is terrific. They're great partners. They're so good at recruiting the students and putting this program in place and making it work for everybody who's involved. So it's been a really fun partnership. And that's the fun part of our job is we don't have a big foundation, right? We have to go raise money from the private community. But then once we're able to raise the money, we're able to put it into these projects that are having such a huge difference or making such a huge difference or having such a big impact that it's very circular. And then people say, oh my gosh, I saw this great work you're doing. And then they continue to give us funding. Or sometimes we find a great project and we say, this would be awesome, but we don't have the money. And then we go out to the community and say, hey, can you help us? And there's just so many generous philanthropic people around here who care. And that is what allows us to do great work.
Well, that solving that philanthropic piece is huge. You remind me of the old Steve Martin routine where he says, how to make $1 million and not pay taxes. Okay,
Yeah.
first make $1 million, then right.
Yeah.
So, but that first step, he doesn't tell you how to make the $1 million, and you're in the position of like, okay, so and once we raise the money, how do you go about raising the money? Because that's something that really needs to be scaled across other communities as well,
Yeah, I think it's one, it's that people care.
right?
I think it's how we use our money really attracts the attention of people. We over the last 12, 13 years, we've raised almost $25 million of private funding,
Wow.
which is a great number. But what's even cooler is we've used that to secure over $120 million of public funding. So we
Oh,
found this
terrific.
amazing formula where we can squeeze every dollar out of the private dollar to get as much public funding as possible. And that gets people really excited.
Is that something you can sum up briefly for me?
Somewhat. I'm sorry.
Is that something you can sum up briefly? Like, how do you turn X private dollars into X squared public
Yeah,
dollars?
it's finding different opportunities, and sometimes it means being the first dollar in to attract the public funding, or sometimes there is public funding available and you need a match to go secure the public funding. And sometimes it's a public grant that's competitive, and so we'll show up with private funding right away, and then when the public agencies apply for the grant, they're able to say, "Oh, we have this commitment from a private organization, private funders of the community," and then they rate higher on their application.
I see.
Yeah.
So what are you finding is the most impactful thing that you do in the course of your day?
Oof. It's a lot. It's a bit, lots of different things.
Yeah, I know. You've got so many moving
Yeah,
pieces.
I mean, I kind of sum it up this way, which is we have this incredible board, and they're very focused on getting things done. They use a different term, but I'll say things here. They're like, let's go get things done. Um,
GSD. Yeah.
they're very GSD, with a real eye towards innovation, and really being a catalyst for things. So they're like, how can we help? What are the big problems? What are we doing to change the way people are thinking about things, to bring funding that can unlock barriers? And then we have these wonderful donors who are like, we love Lake Tahoe and we want to help protect and take care of this place and make it better. And how do we do that? Let us know how we can help you. And then we have these incredible partners. We work with more than 50 partners, and they come to us and say, we have this problem and we need your help. And so every day we kind of sit in the middle of that to say, we want to help. We have the funding to help. We need help. How can we bring this all together? And so every day is kind of spent like that, solving problems, and getting stuff done.
So you're really a coagulator.
We are, yeah, it's really fun. And we're
Right.
we're kind of a neutral convener. Our only goal is to make things better. We don't have a side agenda. We don't own any land. We don't have a public board or public funding that we have to report to. It's really just about like, how do we make Tahoe a better place? How do we fix our forests? How do we have better sustainable recreation? How do we make sure we're doing everything we can to improve like clarity? Um, and so it makes it very easy for us to be nimble and bounce around and be that assistance to everyone working here to say, how can we help?
Install a big water filter.
Yeah. We actually just worked on a acquisition in the largest watershed in Tahoe, which is basically a water filter. Back in the 70s, they built a giant motel in the middle of the watershed, and the public agency in Tahoe, California Tahoe Conservancy, just bought it in March. We helped with that. We just launched a campaign this week to raise the funding gap of a couple $100,000 to help tear that building down so restoration can begin. So.
And then use the lumber from the building to make biochar.
Oh, that would that would be a good idea. Yeah,
Yeah.
biochar. That's the thing we haven't cracked yet. I love biochar. I think it just makes so much sense, and we just haven't been able to find the right partner that can really scale it around here. But we're not going to give up.
Well,
It's great.
if we work hard enough, we'll one day regain the wisdom that people had 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, I know exactly. Isn't it like we're going back in time? I just started reading Braiding Sweetgrass. If you haven't read that, I highly recommend it.
What is it called?
Braiding Sweetgrass.
Braiding sweetgrass.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's, a biologist who's also a member of a tribe in upstate New York, and just talking about everything that the Native people know about how you take care of the environment so the environment can take care of you, and kind of bringing that mentality back to the work we're doing.
Do you feel you can improve the quality of the environment in Tahoe by improving the quality of land stewardship upwind from you? Because you could do everything just right, and if there's a community 50, 100, even 1,000 miles upwind of you that's burning, you're all breathing the smoke, and that kind of makes it feel like, well, why are we doing all this work here when we're still breathing the smoke? So
Yeah.
you have to figure out, I think, how can you replicate what you're doing or teach other organizations to do this, because we all have to do it, because as far as I can tell, there's only one atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely. And
And I love you're starting at home, which is like the only thing you could do.
yeah, and we're
But
definitely not alone. I mean, there's a wonderful group of private funders that get together. I was actually in Colorado, I don't know, 3 months ago or so. We get together every 6 to 8 months and talk about what's the role of private philanthropy to help move all this forest health work forward. So there are a lot of organizations in different areas, very focused locally, and then we come together to share what we're doing locally so we can take it back home and everybody can expand their work where they're doing work. So it's been great. I mean, the Moore Foundation is just been terrific. I don't know if you've talked to anyone
Absolutely.
over there, but they're leading the charge on putting a lot of philanthropic funds into the wildfire space in a meaningful, impactful way.
Not the least of which is the X Prize.
Yeah, the X Prize is great. Yeah, I mean, I think for years Tahoe sits so close to Silicon Valley, right? This is their backyard. People who work in Silicon Valley or the Bay, they're keeping people plugged in all the time and they need to unplug. So they come to Tahoe to unplug. And for years we would say, how do we get their attention? Like there's all this EQ sitting or an IQ sitting right there. How do we get them to focus on this issue? And it was really the fires of 2019 and 2020 when California and San Francisco filled with smoke that some really great entrepreneurs looked around and said, hey, this is not good. How can we use technology to help? A guy, we were talking earlier, Bill Clerico from Convective Capital, he said, this is the time, this is the moment. He started something called the Red Sky Summit because there were red skies in San Francisco. It's really ominous. And sometimes you have to experience something to truly appreciate that it's going to impact you and try to find a solution for it. And so wildfire smoke is terrible because it means a community is burning down, but sometimes it's the catalyst to see good things actually start to come of it. So.
Oh yeah, that day when you couldn't see the Brooklyn Bridge, from one side of Manhattan to the other, I thought, oh, thank goodness. When Wall Street's breathing the smoke, they'll finally realize, like, this is not just a West Coast thing.
Yeah.
This is a world thing, and we all need to be involved in the solution.
Absolutely. I was just reading Morgan Housel's book, Same as Ever. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And he says you can't predict things in the world because the world's so zany, but you can always predict human behavior. And one of his points is you can't appreciate something until you've gone through it. And then once you've gone through it, you appreciate it. And then he said sometimes really terrible things are required because that's actually what leads to innovation and change. So he went back in history and talked about, when we had a war, this is what came out of it. And when we had a crisis, this is what came out of it. Without the crisis, sometimes you don't get the attention you need to fix a problem.
And we wouldn't have GPS. Right?
Yeah, a lot of things we wouldn't have.
Or any of the other antibiotics or any of the other things.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I'm really, really nervous because, the patterns show we had a really big winter in 22, 23. We had a pretty good winter this winter. And you'd think, more precipitation, more water for the trees, less fire, but actually it's more water for all the underbrush. So I was on a hike this morning and I couldn't believe it. Within the last week, the grass has grown, it's overhead high, which is beautiful in June, but in a month it's all going to dry out and it's just kindling and it's going to be so easy for wildfire to spark. So really nervous.
Yeah, I think CAL FIRE said the number of fires this year is only up 9%, but the number of acres burned is up over 500%.
Yeah, we got lucky. Last year we didn't really have any we had a couple, but not super major fires. And so you get complacent and then, it doesn't take long. So be prepared, get your to-go box ready to go and do all your defensible space work while you can.
Yeah, or reduced fuel zone, I call it. The idea, I think calling it defensible space gives people the idea that you're supposed to stay home and defend it, which you are not supposed to.
No.
You're supposed to get the heck out of there as quick as you can.
Yeah.
And just hope that it doesn't burn because there's got a reduced fuel zone around it.
Yeah, I mean,
whatever you call it, it's the same mitigation work.
Yeah. So. We had the Caldor fire come into Tahoe a couple of years ago. It was really scary because it started pretty far from the basin and we have granite borders basically, and never once has a fire come over the granite wall. Well, it came roaring right over the granite wall and it didn't slow down until it hit a fuels treatment. So that's where they went out in the forest and the flames dropped from 100 feet down to 10 or 12 feet. You just can't put a fire crew in front of 100-foot flames. There's nothing they can do. But 10 to 12-foot flames, they can start to manage it. And they were able to push the fire out of the basin back up behind the hill, and no structures were lost in the Tahoe Basin and no one lost their life, which was just a miracle.
Well, I do anticipate that we will be able to put crews in front of fires of any size, but they'll be robotic hotshots.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, they don't care how smoky or hot it is.
Yeah, that's what we need. Yeah,
Amy, thanks so much for taking some time to share the work that you're doing with the Tahoe Fund. And I would love to see the Tahoe Fund playbook, so that could be replicated by communities who have the same drive to do what you're doing, but just haven't figured out how to do it.
Oh, that's a great idea. One thing I didn't mention is we put all of this forest health effort under something we call the Smartest Forest Fund. Because I was having a conversation one day with one of the researchers at the Forest Service, and she said, Amy, we have the potential to make Tahoe the smartest forest on the planet. And I was like, oh my God, that's such a great. I said, I'm going to steal that term. And so we were able to raise this sort of philanthropic venture capital fund under the Smartest Forest Fund. And that's where we're funding everything out of it. And we need to put a playbook together for that because it's been incredibly successful. And I think the most important thing, if people are listening, saying, how do you do this, is the ability to take on risk, and to say we're okay with risk. So when we started the Smartest Forest Fund, the language was very clear that we are going to do things that might not work, and we're okay with that because we want to be able to take the risk, shoulder the risk of our public agency partners, try it. If it works, amazing, it'll go everywhere. And if it doesn't work, okay, we learned something, it doesn't work, and we'll take it off the shelf, but we're not putting public funds at risk by using philanthropic dollars in that space. So
very nice. One of the firefighters that I follow on LinkedIn posted a quote this week, and it said, quitting is the only form of failure. Everything else is just information gathering.
Yeah, exactly. I love it.
So, great. Amy, thank you so much
for
joining me on the show today.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I look forward to catching up with you again and hearing more about the progress that you're making as you deploy new technologies and bring new philanthropy into the field. Amy Berry with the Tahoe Fund. Until she puts her playback out, your best chance of getting something like the Tahoe Fund at home is reach out to Amy.
Yeah, please do.
I'll put a link right here. You've been listening to or watching, my preference, The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf, and we'll see you at the next one. Take care.